The Asian Games, also known as the ASIAD, are a multi-sport event held every 4 years, bringing together athletes from across Asia to compete in various sports. Established in 1951, the Asian Games promote friendship and cultural exchange, showcasing the diversity and excellence of Asian sportsmanship. This prestigious event fosters unity and celebrates athletic achievements on the continent.
Machiavelli lived from 1469 to 1527. The philosopher Bertrand Russell referred to Machiavelli's most well-known book, The Prince, as a gangster's handbook. And while there's no doubt that certain people have read and used it as such, I think that if we put it into the context of when it was written, which was Italy, especially Florence, Indiana, 15th and 16th centuries, it will be easier to judge Machiavelli's reasons for writing it. Now, the Italy of that period was made up of a number of city-states, often at war with each other. Add to that threats from foreign powers, especially France, and it was a very unstable and dangerous situation. Machiavelli loved his home, Florence, and wanted to protect its culture, history, and above all independence at all costs. One way to do this was to establish an army of Florentines loyal to the city-state of Florence. Much of Machiavelli's career was taken up with this issue.
Today, 150,000 farmers in India have committed suicide in areas where seed has been destroyed, or they have to buy the seeds from Monsanto and buy every 8 very high cost, and that high cost seed is getting him into debt, and the debt is pushing them to suicide. What we've done is create community seed banks, places where we collect and save seeds, rescue them from disappearance, multiply them, and then distribute them according to farmers' needs.
When this dog approaches some food, another dog's playful snarls are played back. The dog seems curious, but the sound doesn't stop it from taking the bone. Here a dog hears the growls of a dog being approached by a stranger, but these don't deter it from grabbing the bone either. In another scenario, the sound of a dog protecting its food is played back. This time the dog backs off. Experiments suggest the dogs can distinguish between different types of growls.
Word comes from California of a new weapon in the war on household pests. 2 scientists working for a firm in Anaheim, California, have developed a method to eliminate insects without using dangerous chemicals. The new poison? Hot air. The basic idea is that insects cannot adjust to temperatures much above normal. In laboratory experiments, cotton termites can't survive much more than a quarter of an hour at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 50 degrees centigrade. The new method involves covering a house with a huge tent and filling it with air heated to around 65 degrees centigrade. Hot air is forced in with fans, and the tent keeps the heat inside the house.
Everyone is interested in improving their diet. Adding grains is one of the easiest ways. Many people in the United States have a growing concern about nutrition, so grains are often served in restaurants. And many grains are now available in grocery stores, too, though for some you still have to go to health food stores. You can stock up when you, though, because uncooked grains keep a long time. You'll find that grains are easy to prepare. Many grains are as simple to cook as spaghetti. Barley, for instance, is just cooked in salted water. Remember, though, whole grain barley, the most nutritious kind, never will get as tender as spaghetti no matter how long it's cooked.
The notion that you could create anything at all has major implications for our health. It means that we'll eventually be able to replicate anything. This would have a phenomenal effect on our society. In time, it could even lead to the eradication of famine through the introduction of machines that produce food to feed the hungry.
And many sufferers don't know the cause or the solution to their problem. The majority of our patients at the clinic tend to be women. They are especially vulnerable because of pregnancy but also because of osteoporosis, which I personally believe to be the major cause of problems for women. I have many women patients who say they have completely given up exercise because the pain makes them so miserable. But of course, that starts up a vicious circle.
Living in the Antarctic hasn't always been so comfortable. Snow buildups caused enormous problems for previous stations on the same site, which were buried and finally crushed by the weight. Fortunately, no one was hurt. But these buildings became a huge challenge to architects, who finally came up with a remarkable solution. The buildings are placed on platforms, which can be raised above the changing snow level on leads which are extendable.
Brooke and her colleague Mark Newman studied who swapped messages with whom on a popular online dating platform in the month of January 2014. They categorized users by desirability using PageRank, one of the algorithms behind search technology. Essentially, if you receive a dozen messages from desirable users, you must be more desirable than someone who receives the same number of messages from average users. Then they asked, how far out of their league do online daters tend to go when pursuing a partner? I think people are optimistic realists.
We appear to take it as a rule, or as a law of nature, that each species is adapted to the climate of its own home. For example, species from the Arctic, or even a temperate region, could not survive in a tropical climate, nor could a tropical species last long if it found itself at the South Pole. But it is true to say there's too much emphasis placed on the degree of adaptation of species to the climates where they live. We assume that this adaptation, if all species are descended from a single form, must have taken place over millions of years. Yet a large number of plants and animals brought from different countries remain perfectly healthy in their new home.
Now I like the history, and one thing I want to go over briefly is a history of epigenetic research, and this is from my perspective now. I got into this field in the early 90s. And what I have here is plotted publications, total publications, and function of time here. And on a linear graph. So what for this is I wanted to show that basically up until around the year 2000. There's an inflection point right around 2005 right in here, where it looks like basically nothing really is happening much in the field of epigenetics, to the point where it's actually going vertical, and a lot is happening in field of epigenetics.
For better or worse, we live in a world profoundly affected by Sigmund Freud. If I had to ask you to name a famous psychologist, the answer of most of you would be Freud. He was the most famous psychologist ever, and he had an intelligent influence on the 20th and 21st century. Some biographical information: he was born in the 1850s. He spent most of his life in Vienna, Austria, but he died in London, and he escaped to London soon after retreating there at the beginning of World War II, as the Nazis began to occupy where he lived.
Well, basically just hitchhiking on the point. If you look at the customers at the Wall Street Journal, the basically financial news, financial people here are people who rely on sound, valid and tallied data to make investment decisions. They look at things and track trends in the industry, worrying about things like profit maximization. If they even suspected that political issues and ideological issues from the editorial page were going to start affecting the flow of valid financial information, if they even thought that ideological issues were going to affect their ability to understand investments and make sound decisions, they get very upset.
The main reason why MSG is more commonly used in Japanese meals is tradition. For many thousands of years, the Japanese have incorporated a type of seaweed known as kombu in their cooking, as they discovered it had the ability to make food taste better. But it wasn't until 1908 that the ingredient in kombu which was responsible for the improvement in flavor was actually discovered to be glutamate by scientists working there.
Twin studies have been very useful in giving us information about whether our genes or our environment makes us who we are. A surprising result is the way that genes influence our work. At a basic level, our genes affect how we look, and so they influence whether we can become a basketball player or a supermodel, for example. However, there is evidence that genes influence our choice in much greater ways. Research shows that identical twins choose more similar jobs than non-identical twins.
The shipping container is one of the mainstays of international trade. The globalized modern economy depends on the rapid and efficient movement of goods that containerization allows. In many ways it was the advent of the container that allowed this globalized economy to develop. Invented during World War II as an method of moving equipment to the front lines. There are now at any one time up to 15 million containers being used to transport goods on land and sea or waiting to be filled at factories and ports.
Times are fraught, and overstretched executives are constantly on the lookout for a way to clear their minds so they can work in a calmer, more effective, and more responsive way. Cultivating a special state of consciousness called mindfulness, an intense awareness of the here and now, is proving attractive to a growing number of senior managers, both in the US and elsewhere. Mindfulness is achieved by meditation techniques, often involving sitting on a cushion, eyes closed, concentrating on the inflow and outflow of your breath. Or you might spend 10 minutes studying, sniffing, tasting, and finally eating a piece of fruit.
A diamond that formed deep in the Earth's mantle contains a mineral never seen before in nature. The discovery is a rare glimpse into the deep mantle and may help reveal new information about the structure of the planet at depths of more than 660 kilometers. This can help geologists better understand how the mantle controls the Earth's plate tectonics.
Cancer is most treatable when caught early. But despite the vast resources aimed at finding ways to detect the disease in its initial stages, many people who qualify for existing screenings still do not receive them. Some are unfamiliar with the constantly evolving guidelines on when and where to get tested. Others have never been informed that they need exams in the first place.